If you saw a teenage girl with braided pigtails riding a bicycle through the streets of the occupied Netherlands in 1943, what would you think? Perhaps she was heading to school, or maybe she was running an errand for her mother. To the German soldiers patrolling the corners, she was invisible, just another innocent child in a world gone mad. They were wrong. That girl was one of the most dangerous individuals in the Dutch resistance. Beneath the harmless exterior was a young woman who had made a terrifying choice: to fight monsters by becoming their worst nightmare. This is the story of Freddie and Truus Oversteegen, the teenage sisters who turned their innocence into a weapon and executed Nazis when the world was looking the other way. To understand how two young girls became elite assassins, we have to look at where they came from. Freddie was born in 1925 in a small village outside Haarlem. Her childhood was far from the white picket fence ideal. Her family lived on a houseboat, and her parents eventually divorced. Her mother, Truus, was a staunch communist with a moral compass that pointed toward justice at any cost. She raised her daughters with a single, unwavering rule: when you see an injustice, you do not look away. You act. Even before the war, the Oversteegen home was a sanctuary. Despite having almost nothing and sleeping on mattresses stuffed with straw, they shared what they had with those who had less. They welcomed Jewish refugees fleeing Germany and political fugitives running from the rising tide of fascism. Freddie and Truus grew up sharing their space with strangers whose real names they often didn't even know. They learned early on that humanity isn't defined by what you have, but by what you are willing to sacrifice for others. Everything changed on May 10, 1940. Nazi Germany invaded the Netherlands, and within 5 days the country fell. The occupation was immediate and brutal. The sound of hobnailed boots echoed on the pavement, and the terrifying thud of rifle butts against doors became a nightly reality. Freddie was only 14 and Truus was 16. Most people their age were terrified, but the Oversteegen sisters felt something else: a cold, burning sense of duty. They started small, joining their mother in distributing illegal anti-Nazi newspapers and pamphlets. They would sneak through the shadows at night, covering German propaganda with messages of freedom. It was dangerous work, but as two young girls on bicycles, they were the perfect scouts. Who would suspect them? Certainly not the German officers, who often gave them a pass. But their bravery didn't go unnoticed. In 1941, a man named Frans van der Weyl arrived at their door. He was the commander of the Haarlem Council of Resistance. He had seen their work and knew their reputation. He didn't want them to just hand out papers anymore. He wanted to recruit them into the armed resistance. He asked their mother if her daughters could join. Truus didn't hesitate. She said yes. The girls said yes. But joining the underground wasn't as simple as signing a paper. Frans needed to know if these teenagers had the steel required for what was coming. He tested them by staging a fake Gestapo raid, screaming in German and demanding information. The girls didn't break. They didn't cry. They fought back with everything they had. When Frans revealed the ruse, he told them the truth: you will learn to sabotage bridges, you will learn to blow up trains, and most importantly, you will learn to kill. Freddie, the younger sister, simply grinned and said that was something she had never done before. Their journey began in a dark, underground potato shed, where they first learned how to aim a pistol and pull the trigger. Gemini said. The transition from throwing pamphlets to pulling triggers happened faster than anyone expected. For Freddie and Truus, their youth wasn't a liability, it was their greatest tactical advantage. While adult men in the resistance were constantly searched and interrogated, two teenage girls on bicycles were practically invisible to the German occupiers. They could move weapons, messages, and stolen ID cards right under the noses of the SS. But soon the resistance needed them to do something much more difficult than smuggling. They needed them to eliminate the cancerous tumors of society: the Dutch collaborators who were betraying their own neighbors to the Gestapo. Freddie's first mission felt like something out of a nightmare. She was assigned to take out a Dutch woman who had compiled a list of every Jewish family in the region. This list was a death sentence for hundreds of innocent people. To carry out the execution, Freddie used her most effective disguise: her own innocence. She wore her hair in braided pigtails, looking like a harmless 12-year-old. She approached the woman on a park bench, asked for her name to confirm the target, and then with a steady hand she did what had to be done. As she rode away on her bicycle, she felt a strange, conflicting urge to turn back and help the person she had just shot. It was a haunting reminder of the lesson their mother taught them: to stay human even in the face of monsters. As the war intensified, the sisters developed a signature method that would later become legendary. They would frequent upscale bars and taverns where Nazi officers gathered. One of the sisters would strike up a conversation with a high-ranking officer, flirting and laughing until he was completely disarmed. Then she would lean in and ask if he wanted to go for a stroll in the forest. The officers, thinking they were in for a romantic encounter, followed them deep into the woods, far from witnesses. There, the other sister would be waiting in the shadows. A single shot, a pre-dug grave, and the sisters would be back on their bicycles before anyone realized the officer was missing. In 1943, their duo became a trio. Hanny Schaft, a former law student with striking red hair, joined their cell. Hanny was the intellectual, the one who meticulously planned their escape routes and gathered intelligence. Together, the three young women became a lethal unit. They blew up railway lines carrying prisoners to concentration camps and smuggled Jewish children to safety. But they also drew a very clear line in the sand. When the resistance leadership ordered them to kidnap the children of a high-ranking Nazi official to use as leverage, the girls flatly refused. They told their commanders that they were soldiers, not terrorists. They would kill the enemies of freedom, but they would never harm a child, even the child of their enemy. This moral clarity was what kept them from becoming the very thing they were fighting against. By 1944, the Nazis were desperate to find the girl with the red hair. Hanny had been spotted too many times, and her description was on every wanted poster in the Netherlands. She dyed her hair black and wore glasses to hide her identity, but she refused to stop her missions. The trio knew the net was closing in, but with the Allied forces advancing, they believed they only had to hold on for a little while longer. They had no idea that the final months of the war would bring their greatest tragedy. The air in the Netherlands grew heavy in early 1945. Everyone knew the end of the war was near, but for the resistance, the danger had never been higher. Hanny Schaft was now the most wanted woman in the country. She had dyed her hair black and moved constantly, but her luck finally ran out at a Nazi checkpoint. When the soldiers searched her bicycle, they found illegal newspapers and a pistol. They took her to a prison in Amsterdam, where weeks of interrogation and torture followed. Hanny never broke. She never gave up Freddie or Truus. It was only when her roots began to grow back red that the Nazis realized they had finally captured the girl from the posters. On April 17, 1945, just 18 days before the Netherlands was liberated, the Nazis took Hanny to the sand dunes of Overveen. 2 Dutch collaborators were ordered to execute her. The first shot only grazed her head. Wounded but defiant, Hanny looked her executioner in the eye and said her famous last words, "I shoot better than you." A second burst of gunfire ended her life at just 24 years old. When the war ended less than 3 weeks later, her body was found in a shallow grave, her red hair still visible above the sand. She became a national icon, a symbol of Dutch defiance. But for Freddie and Truus Oversteegen, there were no medals and no parades when the guns fell silent. Because they were communists, the post-war Dutch government viewed them with suspicion. During the Cold War, the sisters who had risked everything to save their Jewish neighbors were sidelined and forgotten. Truus turned to art, creating sculptures to process the trauma of the war. Freddie tried to build a normal life, getting married and raising children, but the shadows of the forest never truly left her. She suffered from nightmares and insomnia for decades, haunted by the faces of the men she had killed. When people asked her for the exact number of her victims, she always gave the same answer: "One should not ask a soldier any of that." It took nearly 70 years for their country to officially say thank you. In 2014, the Dutch Prime Minister finally awarded them the Mobilization War Cross. Freddie was 89 years old and Truus was 91. It was the first time their sacrifice was recognized by the state they had fought so hard to protect. Streets were named after them and their story finally reached the world. They had outlived the monsters they fought, and they had done it while keeping the promise they made to their mother: always stay human. Truus passed away in 2016, and Freddie followed in 2018, just one day before her 93rd birthday. They were among the very few women in history to take up arms and kill with their own hands during World War II. They weren't characters in a movie, they were teenage girls who decided that some things are worth killing for and some things are worth dying for. Today they rest as heroes, a reminder that even in the darkest chapters of human history, a girl with braided pigtails on a bicycle can change the world.